right, that was Art Bell with Dr. Laurie Nadel. And on our Newsmaker line right now is Dr. Laurie Nadel. Doctor, welcome to the program.
Hey, Daniel, thank you so much for having me on the show. I am actually so thrilled to hear that interview again. I really appreciate your playing it.
Mm-hmm. Well, of course, for many of us, Art Bell is a progenitor of our search for truth, and in fact inspired this broadcast to begin in 2004. About the time he went off the air, I thought, man, Coast to Coast is kind of being taken over, maybe move in different directions. So I thought, well, I'm gonna have a show, and I'm gonna start asking these questions because I want to know. And he needed to go on. But anyway, Doctor, he had you on a program talking about his own sixth sense, a knowing that something was about ready to happen, and he wanted to talk to you. And certainly, we're going to talk to you tonight about the sixth sense as well. So, welcome to the show. And we've got people watching the program. They're going to be sending us questions in as we kind of communicate here and talk about these things. So let's begin with why you started researching into the sixth sense.
No, I actually was thinking about that in preparing for the interview. And to be completely truthful, I had my first paranormal experience when I was 11 years old. I had a lucid precognitive dream in which I saw my beloved pet parakeet lying dead on the car seat, on the back car seat of a family member's car. And a few days later, my grandparents were bringing the parakeet back home from a summer upstate New York. And when I ran out to the car, there was the parakeet lying dead on the back seat, exactly as I had seen in my dream. And I remember standing in the street and just screaming hysterically because that was exactly what I had dreamt. It was, especially growing up in the 1950s with a father who was a scientist and an atheist. I was constantly told that ghosts didn't exist and only logic and only science existed. And of course, it was a very 19th century reductionist model of science. And so any other kinds of dreams that I might have had that were unusual, I kind of suppressed them until my next experience happened when I was 25. And I was a reporter for the United Nations and news agency. And I was living in a place right across the street from where I worked, and there was a voice in a certain corner of the apartment where I had my bed, and it was an old person's voice. It kept talking about this is what it's like to get old and get sick, and nobody comes to see you, and it was kind of creepy because I couldn't sleep, and it went on every night for a few nights until I moved my bed to the far side of the room. But there was a lot of traffic noise at that side of the room. And logically, I shouldn't have been able to sleep there, but I was able to sleep there. So then I thought, well, maybe something weird happened in that corner, because every time I tried to sleep there, the same voice would come back. And in fact, it did turn out to be the spirit of the person, the old man who had lived there before, who had actually had a psychotic break in exactly that corner, which is where the bed had been located. And after that, I started to have more kind of, phenomena happen that were, shall we say, out of the ordinary. And I was guided to the Society for Psychical Research, American Society for Psychical Research. My family thought that I should be committed. In those days, in the early 1970s, there was no New Age section of the bookstore, and you weren't supposed to have these kinds of events happening to you. But the researchers at the Society for Psychical Research told me that, what I was describing was perfectly normal for the paranormal. And that led me on a lifelong quest, really, to explore the unknown and try to explain the unexplainable. Ultimately led to my writing the book Sixth Sense, Unlocking Your Ultimate Mind Power, which has been in print since 1990.
Very, very nice indeed. I think a lot of people have had a sixth sense or some sense or knowing. Guys, from the guy's standpoint, we call them hunches.
Right.
For women, it's like a woman's intuition. So it's been with us, and a lot of people, I am sure, have had it. And by the way, those in the live chat, if you're watching on the website, or if you're watching on our YouTube channel, go to the chats, and if you've had a sort of, I don't want to say, maybe say psychic experience, or a precognition, or if you've had a sixth sense about something, and you made and it happened, then just make a quick note in the live chat, and we'll move that on over to Dr. Laurie Nadel. And as well, if you have any questions for her as well, put them in the chat. So Doctor, I've had a few of those, and they're, like Art Bell said, it is indisputable. Some of the things that I've experienced, that he experienced, and I've experienced, when you experience, when you have them, it's like you really can't explain them away. But then you go in this sort of search, well, why don't I have them all the time? And why didn't it happen when I really needed it to happen? They seem so spontaneous. And I noticed Art Bell said it never happened again, but his was quite profound and affected him. And most of the times they do. It's actually a shock. So why is it that they don't seem to be repeatable?
Well, I think that each experience, each sixth sense experience is unique. But I think that, our intuition, if you will, that ability to know something spontaneously, we call it without the conscious use of reasoning, when we have one of those flashes or hunches or gut feelings or aha moments, or we have a dream that gives us this feeling that it's giving us a message, or maybe we have a family member who comes and speaks to us in the dream and gives us a message, and we feel like we're really being given a warning, or we're given, some kind of a clue to something. This is our own internal language. And just as some people are better at languages, and some people are better at broadcasting, and some people are better at sports or baseball, some people are just better at intuition. And, just like everybody can learn how to play the piano, and everybody can learn how to play chopsticks. Mm-hmm. And some people can practice, really, really well, and they can learn how to play Chopin. And if you're really good at it, you can play Chopin at Carnegie Hall, but there's only one Chopin, or there's only one Mozart. Mm-hmm. And so some people are really gifted, and they just naturally have these experiences again and again and again, because they know how to read and recognize their own personal signal, and they don't tend to brush it off. Mm-hmm. And we're conditioned in this country to basically discount it and to brush it off. And so I would be willing to bet that Art Bell had been getting many kinds of subtle sixth sense experiences along the way, especially because he was the pioneer, really, in these kinds of talk shows, like the conversation we're having now. And he was very courageous, because I remember saying to Oprah when I was on her show about premonitions that it's easier for people to talk about incest than it is to admit that they had a dream about something that came true. We're very embarrassed by it, especially guys, and so we suppress it. So maybe we are having these experiences all the time, but until we learn how to recognize our own private language, we don't know that we're getting messages or warnings or advice, that we should trust somebody who we just met, or that we should not sign, that paper with that car dealer. We're getting this advice all the time, but we tune it out.
Mm-hmm. And by the way, I want to welcome additional people in our live chat. Samurai Cop, Stephen Fleming, Southern Boy, Geoff is back with us, Gil, Jim Tedesco, Joey Splatz, and Truth and Treasure. Put Yahweh first as well. Of course, Jade is our moderator of the Edge broadcast. Well, so I certainly had my share of experiences, and I noticed in the bio that we have on you on our website there, it seems like you busted open the government's sort of secret psychic espionage program. Well, how did that happen?
No, I was a journalist in the first, 20 years of my career, and I worked for Newsweek. I was covered war reporter in South America during the state of siege in Chile, and then I worked for ABC and CBS News. And when I started writing Sixth Sense, I interviewed astronaut Edgar Mitchell, and he was one of the first Apollo astronauts who had a kind of revelation or an epiphany in space, where he connected with the cosmic consciousness, where he knew that there was a higher intelligence that was kind of directing the planets and the universe. And as a result, he came back and he started an institute called the Institute of Noetic Sciences, which started doing research and actual controlled studies and research into the what was then considered to be and may still be considered kind of a fringe area of science or mind-body science. And it was Edgar Mitchell who told me about the secret espionage program, and he sent me out to California to interview Dr. Willis Harman, who was his protege, who was running the Institute of Noetic Sciences, and he had been part of that secret program. And every time I asked somebody, they sent me around just to interview some of the physicists who told me these amazing stories, and they kept telling me that the program didn't exist anymore. And this was now 1988. And as a journalist for 20 years, and my lead into this is that when people are lying to you. And I knew that they were lying to me. I knew every time somebody looked at me, I go, "Oh, we don't do that anymore. We don't have this program anymore." I knew that they were lying, but I was at that point no longer working for a big news organization. And, there were too many stories about independent investigators who go missing. And I was a young mom, and I thought, I can report on this program and I can report on what I was told, but I know that there's more to it. And in fact, the program was not declassified until 1996. So my reporter's hunch was right on the money.
All right. Now we have this question here. It says, Doctor, do we get premonitions from God? I saw one of my parents getting a deadly disease. 2 years later, my dad died from cancer. I didn't say anything because they never believed anything I told them anyway. So I guess there's suggesting, are these premonitions from God?
I'm not an expert on God. I believe that these premonitions come from a higher dimension of knowing or consciousness, a spiritual force that sometimes gives us information to warn us and to help us prepare so that we can grieve ahead of time. So, as if you call that, if that's what you call God or Spirit or the Holy Spirit, I would say yes.
All right. And for those of you watching, if you have had an experience, go ahead and put that in the live chat. I have said, Doctor, and I noticed that Art Bell had said that he had a sort of a singular event. And the seminal moment for mine, I'll share it with you, and the audience have heard me say it before. But one night I had a dream, and the dream had to do with this large water tower. And this large water tower was in the area that I lived in. And in the dream, a door at the bottom of the water tower opened up and all the water came out. And I thought, well, that's a crazy dream. Why would I even have a dream like that? So next day, I went to this new church, and I was standing in the foyer and I was talking to somebody I've never met before. And I was saying, they said something about a dream, and I said, well, I said, I had a crazy dream last night. I said, I had a dream that water tower down there on 40, the door opened up and all the water came out. And somebody from another group, how people kind of get in these little groups, well, somebody from another group came running over and said, what'd you say? And I said, well, I was just telling him my dream, and he made me repeat the dream. Well, turned out that guy was the guy that built the water tower, and he said that the door opened last night and all the water came out. Now,
oh my God.
That is indisputable, without a doubt, proof positive that these things, these communications to us do come. The viewer asked about, did God give them the information? I guess it depends on your point of view. I would probably guess for myself, yes. Certainly wasn't me telling myself. Now perhaps maybe I got up in the middle of the night and out of my body and I looked. I don't know. It's more logical that a supreme being gave me that information. But anyway, it's indisputable. So I'm thinking, wow. What can I do with that information? It'd been better if I told him if I had a dream before, and then he wouldn't check the door. But so, like Art Bell, he didn't prevent somebody from running into his car. So what do we do with this information sort of after the fact?
Well, sometimes we get information that we can act on, and I'll give you an example in a moment. But a lot of the time, in writing Sixth Sense, I kind of came up with this way of explaining it, which is that our sixth sense functions like a satellite dish in the brain or in the mind, and it's able to pick up information in the form of images, in the form of signals, in the form of voices sometimes, that can give us information about things that haven't happened yet, because actually time isn't linear. I mean, physicists will tell you, we think of it as past, present, and future, but the part of your mind that's able to tune that satellite dish into what something is about to happen, that part of us doesn't know that it's not allowed to do that, because time, doesn't really follow that progression. So when we're sleeping, sometimes we're able to pick up information. Like before 9/11, many people had precognitive dreams and reported them to their therapists, including people reported dreams to me as early as a year before 9/11. Planes flying into towers, people flying off the tops of buildings, buildings falling down, smoke filling the streets, and people running. So sometimes when there's a big event, that satellite dish is kind of tuned into something that Carl Jung called the collective unconscious, where kind of energy is kind of gathered. And before the pandemic started, many people had called me and said they had a terrible sense of foreboding and that something catastrophic was going to happen, and that they felt that way before 9/11. This very often, it's kind of like a psychic imprint in people's minds, that they remember that they had this feeling of impending dread before a major event. Now, I had a series of dreams in 2012, which I write about in The Five Gifts. So thanks for putting, that's my most recent book. And started around Memorial Day of 2012. My father, who passed in 1989, appeared to me in a dream, and he said, Laurie, you're going to need water. You're going to need extra water. Make sure that you go out and buy a lot of water. And I said, okay, Dad, in the dream. And I woke up and I went to the supermarket and I bought a few gallons of water. And then I forgot about it. And then around 4th of July, my Uncle Nick showed up in the dream, and he said, your father and I are very concerned. You don't have enough water. You're going to have an emergency, and you're going to need more water. You have to buy more water. So I went out, I bought a few more gallons of water, and then at Labor Day, my dad showed up, and he was a dentist when he was alive, and he was wearing his lab coat and his glasses, and he looked very severe. And he said, "You're not taking this seriously. You do not have enough water, young lady." So I went out and I filled the attic. We had 13 gallons of water and a few cases of water. And on October, I think 28th, 29th, 2012, Hurricane Sandy destroyed, it destroyed over 1 million homes in the northeastern United States, including my home on a barrier island. And the storm surge destroyed the town sewer pump. And so when the tide went out, all of the properties, the gardens, the houses, everything was contaminated. The water supply was contaminated. And I was the only one on the block who had enough water for the first few days before the Red Cross showed up. And I was able to share the water with my neighbors and my friends. Mm-hmm. So there's an example of a dream where I really believe that my father and my uncle came back from the other side to warn me ahead of time and to give me advice that was actionable. But a lot of the time, people have dreams about things where, you picked up on something that was going to happen, because sometimes we say that intuition is the ability to see around the corner, but that doesn't mean that you can stop what's going to happen, which makes it very frustrating a lot of the time.
Mm-hmm. By the way, on our website, we have a poll question related to this interview, and it is, what is the sixth sense? The choices are extrasensory perception, knowing beyond five senses, intuition or hunch, prior conception, that's if I said that right, and then you see dead people, and there's only five, sorry. But right now we have 50% of the people say that sixth sense is extrasensory perception, 35% say knowing beyond five senses, and 14% say intuition or hunch. So that's a large percentage. There are people that believe that it is out there, and it because they had the option said it doesn't exist, but there's nobody even took that. So I guess a lot of people believe that. But let's get to another question for you. This is from Bear, who gave the Bear Report earlier, part of the program. It says, Doctor, do you have anything to do with the old TV show, The Sixth Sense?
No, but actually I did know, I think, the producers for that show. It was an excellent show, and I'm trying to remember who the host was, but that was an excellent show in which they interviewed people who were professional intuitives and psychics and doctors who were working in the area of consciousness. Sorry, it went off the air.
Not to minimize people that have died around you, but you said that they gave you information. Doesn't that mean that you see dead people?
Well, I don't actually see them, but I have been trained in evidential mediumship after that experience when I was 25, where I learned that somebody had not actually physically died, but had had a psychotic break in that corner. That kind of started me on a lifelong quest to take courses and to learn about the Sixth Sense. And soon after that, I met my father's great aunt, Anna, who was a spiritualist. And she was, I think, in her 70s at the time. And she kind of introduced me to the world of communication with spirits and automatic writing, and kind of opened up that area of exploration for me. But it really wasn't until, I think, 2013 or 2014 that I trained formally at the Spiritualist Association of Lilydale, which is the oldest spiritualist community in the country. So I have occasionally done readings for people, but I stick to friends and family. I'm not a professional medium. But I don't see them, but I am able to listen to them and receive impressions that are usually meaningful if somebody's recently lost somebody who crossed over. So don't actually see them, but I know that they're around.
Now, have you ever researched into the Bible to look for information or stories related to dreams or psychic experiences or resurrection or anything like that? Have you ever looked into that for part of your research?
Not that much. I did a lot of reading in the Book of Revelations for a while. I was a journalist and I had a column in the New York Times called Long Island at Worship, and probably the most fascinating story I did was a story on the end times phenomenon in the suburbs of New York City. And so that was kind of the extent of my exploration into Revelation. But it's fascinating because the Bible has so many accounts of dreams and angels appearing. And a colleague of mine calls the Bible the guidebook to the supernatural.
L.A. Marzulli?
Yeah.
Well,
L.A. Marzulli.
I love the way he says that. You just can't. Yeah. You just can't see when he talks. You just don't. You don't feel like you're getting preached to. You feel like somebody's relaying information to you. And I do like the way that he presents that. So yeah, he is a good guy. I'm glad we both know him. All right. So if anybody's had any things that happened to them, just put it in the live chat there. So now I've heard voices, and I don't know if I wouldn't put that into a sixth sense, but I mean. And people have heard this story as well, but I mean, it's interesting to share it with guests that are in this sort of field. But I was in a checkout counter one time, and I gave the guys my money. He gave me my change, and I said, "How you doing?" He said, "I'm doing fine." And I heard a voice, clear as day, Dr. Laurie, say, "Ask him again." Well, you really don't want to ask somebody again because you don't want to take their time. You want to move on. But what do you do when you hear a voice? Because first of all, am I going to have to check into a psycho board, or am I getting some opportunity? Am I hearing something that's direct from somewhere else? And so I just took a chance and asked him again. I look him in and I said, "No, how you doing?" And then he just started breaking down and started telling me all this stuff, like he was just a well that wanted to share the things that was happening in his life. And he thanked me for asking him again, but he wasn't going to tell me the first time. But if I didn't listen, but now as an audio voice, now I've had events, and I'm sure people in the live chat watching the program have heard voices in their head. And, it's like you kind of said earlier, if you say a voice told me something, society, the culture is programmed to condense around you. They come around you and say, you're crazy, stop it, nonsense. There's only science, only what you can see. They try to tell you that, and it's like we can't advance into that field as a society, as a culture, as a species, a human beings, trying to find out why we are here and what does all this mean. Well, that's a part of it. And there's a part of society that just shuts that conversation down every time. It's an auto reflex, and for most of them, they're programmed to. Ha ha ha! He's hearing voices. Well, maybe he did hear a voice. Now there are, of course, and you're a doctor and you know this, and we put that link up there. Let's put that back up there. Your title there. There are people that hear voices that are insane, but that is manifested by their usually violent and retrograde activities that are easily defined by that. But for others, and the majority of people, it's not that way. Go ahead.
Well, I mean, I think that's a really great point. First, culturally, we unlike just about every other society in the world, accept that these kinds of experiences are part of human nature, and that was one of the reasons why Carl Jung broke with Sigmund Freud. Jung believed that we're connected to something greater than ourselves, and that through our intuition, which is a natural human ability that we all have, that we can receive, messages and we can connect with each other empathically. Some people are able to feel what other people are feeling, like Counselor Troy in Star Trek, who's portrayed as an alien from another planet. Many people are empaths, but they're never told that this is a gift. They're usually ashamed of it. They usually, unless they become entrepreneurs because they're basically very skilled in reading what other people are feeling, and they're able to channel it into some kind of a business a vision or idea or sense of possibility. But Dr. Jonas Salk, who is the one who developed the Salk polio vaccine, wrote a book called The Anatomy of Reality, Merging of Intuition and Reason. And I interviewed him for Sixth Sense. And he believed that unless we begin to honor and encourage children to develop and trust our intuition, that we will make ourselves extinct as a species. Because what we call logic, and when we actually deny some of these inner voices that we have, are voices of hope and creativity and inspiration and intuition, and they signal us, like in your case, that they're kind of urging us to reach out and connect and communicate with somebody. So that would be kind of like an intuitive empathy, what you're just describing. And if we don't learn how to develop that and become more interconnected as a species, we will be the first species in the history of evolution that designed the means to make ourselves extinct for no reason whatsoever, except that the logical brain was smart enough to figure out how to do it. And that's really not very intelligent in my book.
Well, it's interesting what you said about the kids. It seems that, just normally, in normal times, when a child says they see somebody, we instantly, again, we're talking about coming, surrounded them and said, no, you don't, quit imagining, there's nobody there. We basically talk them out of that. And because it does seem like a lot of, children sort of go through at least a little phase of some imaginary play friend or whatever. And we instantly collapse around them to say, oh, that's nice, but it's not true and this and that. But if we were able to get the children to the level of what you just suggested, we just went 50 years backwards, because now we have so many kids with this thing going around, which I won't mention, but putting coverings on their faces, and you can't see them smiling. They can't see their teacher smiling. They can't see their relatives smiling. We're not going forward with that. We're not going to advance that, the youth into a better, more aware, I guess, a more spiritual type of person, because we're pushing them backward. And so I don't know. We have a big stall in society, so I'm not seeing much on that front. All right, let's get some more questions coming in. They're just piling in here now. Smoke C says, Doctor, does the ether play a role in allowing us to see the future?
Well, the ether is a spiritualist term, and it's kind of the description of the energetic interface, if you will. So when we're talking, for example, about the human energy field or the aura, I mean, that's the kind of which has been photographed by Kirlian photographs and other forms of biofield photography. I mean, if you go to a psychic fair, somebody will take a picture of your aura, and you can actually see it. You can train yourself to see it. That interface between the physical world and the non-physical world is what was traditionally called the ether, and it's kind of a nebulous. It doesn't actually have physical properties, and yet it is believed to be a kind of conduit of energy between the spirit world and the physical world. Does it actually exist in the sense, can physics measure it? Now with Ghostbusters and EVP equipment, they probably do have a way of measuring it. But yeah, there are definitely subtle energies that are kind of, we say, thin the veil or make it easier to perceive what's going on in the spiritual or non-physical dimensions.
Well, a sense of knowing isn't just necessarily in the human species realm. There have been videos taken of pet owners. I don't know specifically what I'm thinking of is a dog owner set up a camera because every time they came home, the dog was on the couch with his paws in the window looking out when the owner got home from work. Well, the owner wanted to know if that dog knew only the timing. So he set it up and he came back early 2 or 3 times. And those early times, that dog knew when he was coming back and he had a video to prove it. He came back at alternative times, and the dog still went up on the couch at the time that he was coming in, and because he recorded it. So isn't there a knowing? I mean, doesn't it say that the animal kingdom has some sort of knowing as well?
Animals are so highly intuitive. I had a cat, and I remember once I went away for 7 days, and the cat went walkabout for those 7 days and just didn't come back. And when I came back from the airport, just as we drove up, there was the cat like sitting in front of the front door, just waiting for me to show up. It was amazing. I think that animals are highly, highly intuitive, and they can communicate with us through dreams and through many, many different types of awarenesses.
I see somebody in the live chat said they saw that video. It also reminds me that there's a true story of a tsunami that happened years ago on a certain island. And before the tsunami came, nobody was aware it was coming, but the animals all started running inland. And then the Aborigines, or whoever they were, the Indians, the locals, they went running in because they saw the animals running. And well, how did the animals know that a tsunami was coming? So they actually were bright enough to understand that the animals are running, then maybe we need to run too.
Well, animals are brilliant, and I think they pick up cues in the environment. I remember years ago I had a podcast that was very similar to this show, and there was a story about an oarfish that lived, at the bottom of the Sea of Japan, and it hadn't shown up for 100 years. And when the oarfish showed up, they believed that it was a sign that an earthquake was coming, and shortly thereafter, like within a year, there was a major earthquake in Japan. But the fishermen knew that the earthquake was coming because the oarfish showed up in their nets.
Wow. That's great stuff. Great stuff. All right. Freely Speaking says, Doctor, why do people say, I see dead people, when in fact they are seeing something that is clearly alive, not just in a physical form?
Well, I think that's a really excellent point. We think of spirits or entities as, especially if they take the shape of a human, we think of them as being disincarnate human beings. But in fact, there are many different kinds of spirits. I mean, animals, we have Native Americans and indigenous people connect with power animals, which are animals in spirit, which act as guides for healing, to help bring messages. There are angels that appear to people in broad daylight very often. There are spirits of those who have passed that show up. So there definitely a whole range of other types of spiritual entities who are other than dead people.
Mm-hmm. Have you sort of improved your sense as a result of your books and the Five Gifts and the Sixth Sense? Have you personally improved your ability to perceive things?
I think it's become so interwoven into who I am that I don't even really notice it anymore. But I do really love and appreciate being able to have this conversation, because it's only relatively recently that we've had this opening of acceptance of the paranormal. And when Sixth Sense first came out, it was the first book on psychic phenomena or intuition. I think that the last book on intuition had been published in 1948. There was no New Age section of the bookstore. It was very hard to get information on these kinds of subjects. There were no podcasts. There were no Discovery Channel shows. There were no ghost hunters. And so, if you remember that scene in the movie The Sixth Sense, where the little boy describes what he's seeing, and he gets bullied and he gets ostracized, that was what reality was like for so many kids and adults. We had to really suppress and sequester and hide these perceptions, and you never spoke about it in polite company because people would think that you were schizophrenic and you should be committed. Mm-hmm. So, this is, I think, a huge advance in that we're able to have these conversations and people can tune in and ask questions. And the fact that I'm perfectly comfortable talking about it, I think, allows me to actually allow these perceptions to come in. In fact, a very strange thing happened 5 minutes before you called. Mm-hmm. I have a very heavy coffee table here, and I have my laptop is up here, and the table moved towards me, and the computer fell into my lap, and the glass of liquid that I was drinking fell all over the floor, and I burst out laughing, and I don't know who pushed it because I don't see them, but it definitely didn't move by itself. Yes, I did just say that. Wow. And I have no idea what it was, and I thought, very funny, whoever you are, you know that I'm about to have this conversation, and you just want to make sure that I'm on my toes. So, wow. Whoever you are, thank you.
Wow.
Weird things happen, right?
Yeah, well, they certainly do. Our mutual friend, L.A. Marzulli always said, he had a saying that always kind of stuck with me. He said, when it comes to UFOs, rebuke first, take photographs second. And I always thought that was kind of funny. I consider L.A. Marzulli a hybrid Christian, and I feel like I'm kind of in that realm as well, a hybrid Christian, one that would dare to even have you on this program and talk to you about these things, which I know some would find objectionable, but I feel like we're reasonable people. We can have a conversation even if we disagree, and some things I'll agree, some things I won't, but I think we can learn from each other. But let me ask something about that. So I was thinking about this rebuke first. Now, I kind of, it might be wrong, but I wouldn't mind seeing a UFO. So I thought there was one up there. And I'm thinking, man, if I rebuke this thing, it's going to go away. And so I did not. Don't tell LA, man. He may call me up. But so I didn't rebuke it. So I want to see it, But let me ask you something, though. And I mentioned the Bible to you, and man, it is full. The spiritual guidebook is full, like you said, of dreams, visions, angels ascending, descending, people being out of the body, being on housetops, coming up from the dead. I mean, it's full of this stuff. Do you think that if you did study the spiritual guidebook, that it would sort of be like that, the rebuke first and look and get your camera later, because if you rebuke it, it'll go away? Do you consider that if you studied the spiritual guidebook, that what maybe your senses would be lessened as a result?
I don't think so. I mean, I think it depends on the filters that you use to study it. If you look at L.A. Marzulli, I mean, he's a scholar, and, he's incredibly intuitive and perceptive and wise, in this domain. But you bring up an interesting point. When I first started promoting Sixth Sense The first call-in show I did was on the East Coast in Boston. And the first person who called up was a professional gambler. I still remember his name was Wolfie. And he said, I had a dream. My uncle came to me and he told me, my uncle was a gambler, and he told me that I should bet on the third horse in the sixth race. And I bet on it, and I lost. And so how can I tell a real hunch from a false hunch? So he had a very practical question. And one of the answers, of course, is that if your uncle was a professional gambler and he wasn't very good at it and he comes to you in a dream, don't assume that he knows any more on the other side than he did before, and trust your own hunches rather than the advice. Just because somebody appears to you in a dream doesn't mean that they necessarily have the right information for you. The second place, I was out on the West Coast and I was talking about sixth sense, and you were talking about science and intuition. And somebody called in, and the second questioner I had in my promotional career here, he said, "Hey man, do you believe in like telepathy with extraterrestrials?" And I had to laugh because it was LA. I mean, this is like a perfect West Coast question, right? And my answer was, my book has nothing to do with that, but thank you for asking. And then I was in Indianapolis, and I was giving a talk to the National Association of Retail Druggists, and they had seen me on Oprah, and I was just giving a talk about intuition, hunches, and gut feelings, and women's intuition. And at the end of the talk, this young woman came up to me, and she said, "It's very, very interesting what you talked about." She said, "But you're teaching the work of the devil, and you have the sign of Satan on you." And she starts screaming at me in this crowd of like this luncheon hotel dining room, and they kind of whisked me away and took me to the airport. And so, I mean, I think to answer your question, I think it depends on where you are in your relationship to your spiritual studies, and I think that you can find that the Bible is rich in many accounts of. But
you would be afraid to look in there and do a study in there.
No, I wouldn't be afraid to study in there. I'm just saying that, some people read the Bible and they look for that pejorative or negative filter. They look at it as very negative. But when I've read the Bible and I read these stories about angels appearing, I will share with you a story that I shared with Art Bell, that on September 9th, 2001, I was writing a story for the New York Times. It was about a surfing contest. And I had to file my story at midnight. And as I was getting ready to go from the workroom into the bedroom, my kid was there, curled up with her kitten, and an angel appeared in the room. And I thought that I was working much too hard and I was hallucinating. And the angel stood there and put her wing over the sleeping child and the cat. And the angel said, I swear to God, said, "Whatever happens, I will keep you and your daughter safe." And I looked at this angel and I said, "I'm making you up, right? I mean, I'm hallucinating." And the angel said, "No, I'm real," and smiled, and the whole room filled with this golden light. And I figured, I didn't know what just happened, but 2 days later, the planes hit the towers.
Wow.
And my kid was terrified. And so I said, "Well, I know this is going to sound really strange, but this angel came 2 nights ago and said that we were going to be okay. And thank God, we were able to, we're still here. So many other people perished."
Very nice. Very incredible story there, Dr. Laurie. Okay. Smoke C says, "Doctor, could there be a seventh sense? If so, what do you think it would be?"
Well, Lynn Buchanan, who is one of the psychic spies for the Pentagon, has written an amazing book called The Seventh Sense. And after reading his book, I actually went and studied with him basic and intermediate level remote viewing. Now, Lynn Buchanan describes the seventh sense as a very heightened perception. Like if you train your 5 physical senses to an extremely heightened sense of awareness, which is part of what the government's remote viewing training program approach is all about, your sixth sense will kick in at a much higher level, so that he describes in his book how he was sitting in a cafe somewhere in Europe and he could describe the person who just came in behind him because he was able to basically perceive energetically what was happening behind him. And that's part of what the remote viewing program teaches people to do. So
Wow.
I would say, yeah, it's a kind of more of a heightened sixth sense would be the seventh sense. And I highly recommend that book.
Okay, very interesting. Jay DeModerator says, Doctor, are children more susceptible to experience sixth sense type of events?
I think that everyone has these abilities as children, and I think there was a survey of kids years ago that found that 43% of kids between the ages of 8 and 12 said that they tended to trust their sixth sense or their intuition over their five physical senses. But then when you look at the same data as an adult population, it's only 25% of us who report that we trust our sixth sense over our five physical senses. So it gets trained out of us. But I think that, yes, everybody and kids do have a natural ability to perceive in ways that are not linear and logical.
Hmm. All right, that was a great question there. All right, another question here from Freely Speaking. During pregnancy, do women's sense heighten, and is that what feeling it in one's waters refers to?
I think that's true. I think I know that when I was pregnant, I definitely felt that my intuitive awareness was starting to open up again. I definitely felt a very deep connection to to the new life that was coming in, and I definitely developed much more of a sensitivity to things that were going on professionally around me. Had dreams about things that were going to happen in the workplace that then ended up happening. So I think that that's true. Yeah.
Interesting. Teflon Co says, Doctor, is the COVID virus affecting people's spiritual communications?
I think it is, both positively and negatively. Now, I have a program, it's a free support program for people who have long COVID, which is maybe up to 30% of people who get COVID develop permanent or long-term health problems. And we try to reframe COVID as, we call it a sacred illness. And a sacred illness is one that opens us up experiences ourselves to looking at the world in a more spiritual way so that we can share those insights that we would not have otherwise have had to help ourselves and other people. So I don't think that that's exactly the direction that the questioner was asking, but I think that we have an opportunity to build better spiritual communication because of the collective wound that COVID has inflicted on us, not just as a nation, but as a species. Thank you for that quote. That's yes, it is our American tradition to come together in times of tragedy, and this is how we grow as a people and as a nation. And I truly believe that in disaster, we have an opportunity to come together, and COVID does offer us an opportunity to become more empathic, even though it's extremely frustrating and divisive.
Yeah, that is true, and that is a shame. Kind of goes back to what I said earlier about, one thing for the adults to have problems and to isolate each other, say, well, you got it and you didn't, so I'm not seeing you, or you this and you do that, and these, got all these camps, but it's one thing for the adults to do it, but man, like I said, the kids are right smack dab in the middle of this war, and man, it's just setting us back, Doctor, and I'm trying to move forward, and I know you're trying to move things forward too as well. All right, Gil says, does your sixth sense feel we're going to have World War III in the near future?
I would say that my anxiety wonders whether we're going to have World War III in the near future. There's certainly a lot of flashpoints in the world. I mean, things are heating up in the Middle East. Russia is a big concern. North Korea is a wild card. We're kind of sitting on a powder keg, and then there's climate change. But I try to kind of shut that channel down because it's very easy to kind of watch the catastrophe channel and then get all kinds of physical feelings and think that that's your sixth sense. And sixth sense and anxiety are kind of all on the same spectrum. So that's one of the reasons why it's important to know when that little voice is coming from your sixth sense and not your fear.
Well, I'll tell you what, I do have a word of advice for people. If you have an ache, and or pain, and you got a few years going, do not look at the internet, because you will have everything of the worst case that you read about. How about you're just having a little ache and pain? It's called life. But I'm just telling you, don't look at the internet, man. Again, look for some clinical advice on things. All right, so here we go. This is from Harris Solomon. It says, Doctor, what is the meaning of life? Simple question.
Oh, I wish I knew. I think the meaning of life is that, you say, what is the meaning of your life? I don't know that the marquee ever comes on. And as I said, there are people who read the Bible and they'll interpret it in one way, and other people read the Bible and they'll interpret it in another way. So I don't think that there's any, as I said, I don't think that the flash of lightning comes down. At least, I haven't seen it come down and say, this is the meaning of life. But I do know that there's been a lot of research that people who have survived war and concentration camps and hardship find that if you live your life with a sense of meaning and purpose and connection to others, that gives your life meaning, and that can give a life meaning, and that can give our lives meaning. So I guess I would answer it in that way.
Well, you did give the best answer that you've come to in your experience. But philosophers have been seeking an answer to that question forever. There, Harris, you probably know that before you asked that question. Now, the great philosopher Daniel Ott says, the meaning of life is to learn to love. How about that?
Yes, live with an open heart.
All right, here we go. Tammy Hall says, Doctor, are the schizophrenics actually seeing and hearing someone who is real?
Sometimes schizophrenics have been known to have psychic abilities. And sometimes psychics end up institutionalized because they're believed to be schizophrenic. And I think that's one of the kind of horrors and mistakes that's made very, very often, and especially with traditional psychoanalysis that looks at hearing any voice as being a sign of psychosis. I think we all have many different voices. We all have an encouraging voice that says, "Hey, that was a good job," and we all have a critical voice that says, "Boy, that was really stupid." And these parts of ourselves can help us to navigate life, as well as that voice that says, jump out of the way, or don't trust that person, or read the fine print, or the voice that you heard that said, ask it again. But schizophrenics, as you pointed out, Daniel, they're usually they're not able to function. They're not able to they're not able to carry out normal activities or take care of themselves in the interest of their own survival. So there are behaviors that they need help with, whether it's medication or whether it's counseling or training. So one of my mentors, Dr. Schachter, was a psychiatrist who had actually reported experiences of working with schizophrenics in the hospitals who actually were psychic. Who would say to him, there was one man who would say to him, I'm so sorry you had an argument with your wife this morning, or I'm glad you decided to put on the blue tie instead of the green tie. And of course, he hadn't spoken to anybody about it. So, they can coexist. Schizophrenia and psychic ability can coexist, but they're not the same thing.
Okay, I'm going to jump out of the picture here for just a second, and then for the audience, I'm going to take you out of the picture. Okay, I'm going to show you a quote from a great philosopher, and I want to know if you know who that philosopher is.
Paul McCartney.
Correct. Absolutely correct. If I had a $100 bill, I'd send it to you because you just won a great prize there. And the reason I put that up there is because wisdom can come in many forms and from many different places and different corners of the planet, which is one reason I have this show. And when you look at the guest list on this show, there's no real thing that you could say, well, this show's about that or this show's about that. Because I've come to realize in my experience of what's life about is that everybody has some wisdom and you don't know where it's come from. That's one of my favorite quotes. And it's a great quote. And it's true, too, I would think. All right, Peter from Australia says, are people that have lucid dreams more often likely to have a better sixth sense?
I think so, although there are many people who have precognitive dreams that are not necessarily lucid, in the sense that a lucid dream is one in which you're aware that you're dreaming. It's like you're awake in your dream and you're aware that you're getting a message. So when I had those dreams where my father and my uncle and my father came back, those were lucid dreams. I was aware in the dream that I was dreaming. But very often people will have dreams about things that are going to happen, or they'll have a feeling that they should or shouldn't go to work the next day, and those dreams will not necessarily have that lucid quality. But I think generally, lucid dreaming is definitely on the spectrum of high sixth sense ability.
Mm-hmm. Well, it is clear from the spiritual guidebook that God does speak to people in their dreams, so they are important. But I've had a number of dreams which are just ridiculous, doctor, and it don't seem like it's God talking to me. Now, am I tuning into a different frequency? I mean, are we, some of our dreams, are they some coming from up there, but maybe they're coming from somewhere else? Is somebody hacking our frequency?
Well, that's a whole other question, because can our dreams be hacked? There's a whole area called psychic self-defense, and there are people who claim that they are mentally or psychically being invaded, if you will. But dreams serve many purposes, and one of the purposes that dreams serve is to help us metabolize or digest events during the day, or things that we saw on the news, or something that we saw on TV that might be upsetting or disturbing. Dreams can be they can be very uplifting, that you can wake up feeling that you've been to a magical place, or that you've had this incredible romantic or sexual experience, or you can wake up with your heart racing because a monster's been chasing you through the basement. And dreams have many different levels of meaning. And in my work, with individuals, a lot of the work that we do is to try to understand what's playing out in our dreams, because it gives us a better dimension of self-knowledge.
It seems that we're just mentioning, you said Paul McCartney, but talking about the Beatles, there's a song they have, I think it's called I Got a Feeling, and in that John Lennon talks about having sex in a dream, so kind of weird. All right, so Harris comes back with this question: what is the importance of the sense of smell? Is there a connection to good when you're hungry?
I'm sorry, I don't understand the question.
Okay, well, Harris Solomon, if you would like to rephrase that question, we'll continue to give that to the guest. And by the way, people watching the program, if you have a question for our guest tonight, Dr. Laurie Nadel, talking about Sixth Sense, her book there, and the 5 gifts as well. Put your questions in the live chat on the YouTube channel or on the website. And you can additionally, at the top of the menu of the website, it says direct. It's a direct guest question. You can send your questions through there. So, back to experiences. So every voice that we hear can't be from a good place. So now we're talking about something, and I mentioned about dreams. There must be something about discernment that has to go along with these interpretations of whether or not we're getting a message from a good place. How can we strengthen our interpretation to know what's right?
Could you give me an example?
Well, let's just say, just say a man, for a man's sake, a man was, say, married man would see a woman say, "Oh, I need to go talk to her." Okay, well, that can't be coming from a good place. So it maybe in that case there, that's too easy. It says the man's talking to himself. But some kind of, on some order that maybe you have a dream that says you should go buy a car the next day. But the reality is, if you buy it, you're not going to be able to make the payments.
Right. Well, I mean, that goes back to the man who had the dream about, his uncle who was a failed gambler who told him, to play the third horse in the 6th grade. you always have to use your common sense. And I think that's one of the first things that when I started to have, after that experience where I heard that voice in the apartment, and I started to go to these classes on psychic ability and psychic research, that what they would always tell you first is trust your common sense first. And if you get, if you hear a voice that tells you to buy a stock or to buy a car or to buy a house, and you know that it's out of your reach, don't let any advice or any warning that fills you with a sense of fear. My rule of thumb is any message that is fear-based is something that I just tune it out. Any message that tries to get you to feel guilty, ashamed, or afraid is really it's you don't need messages like that. We can give ourselves enough messages like that, and we do all the time. We're all very complex creatures, and each one of us knows how to make ourselves feel bad. We don't need extra help from the outside world, whether that's coming through a dream or whether that's coming from advertising or any other kind of message.
So what you're saying is believe not every spirit. That's for sure. Now, I had an intuition the other day, started about 2 weeks ago, and my intuition was that Russia was amassing on the Ukraine border, which they certainly wouldn't have done 2 years ago or 3 years ago, but now they feel like they're emboldened, so they did it. And my intuition was to put a stop on my 401k to switch it to a safe account. So I figured, well, now I'll just wait this thing. We'll wait and see what happens. Well, a few days later, boom, and I mean the market's going down, percentages are being lost, and then I finally did. But that wasn't a message of my sixth sense. That was common sense. It seems like to me could have been easily predicted, and some charlatans would have certainly said, hey, my sense, it's coming in now. It's coming in. If Russia's going to invade Ukraine, it's going to smash the stock market. A lot of people play that, and so you got to watch out. So, and you mentioned common sense, but common sense isn't listed in the six senses. Which one is it? Is it another sense?
Well, it's interesting. There are two types of sixth sense that I write about in the book, and one is I could talk about a judge who sees somebody who maybe has a very long rap sheet, but the judge looks at the person and says, my gut feeling is that this person's going to be okay now, and he can go home with his family, and so that judge is drawing upon years of what we call tacit knowledge. That's information that we've acquired through our five physical senses, through years and years of training and practice. I remember I interviewed Dr. Robert Jarvik, who developed the first artificial heart, and he said that they were developing a miniature model, and he had a very strong gut feeling that the model that this engineer had developed wasn't going to work, but he didn't know why. He just had a gut feeling. Well, that was based on his years and years and years of medical experience and education, and he insisted that the engineer rebuild it to this design that kind of came to him on a hunch, and that became the actual working model of the world's first artificial heart. So when you get a hunch about your finances, that would be what we call, a sixth sense that's based on your five physical senses. It's based on knowledge that you've acquired through your lifetime. The other kind of sixth sense that we're talking about, the kind of paranormal, where the source of the information can't be explained through the five physical senses, or what we call extrasensory or paranormal. That's normally what we think of as the sixth sense. But I would say a lot of great scientific discoveries and inventions are the result of that first type of sixth sense, where somebody had a hunch or a gut feeling or a dream. A mathematician had a dream about a formula that he'd been trying to prove mathematically for years. The father of organic chemistry was trying to get the formula of the benzene molecule for 20 years, and then one night he had a dream about a snake eating its tail, and he became lucid in the dream, and that dream showed him what years and years of calculations and formulas and algebra hadn't been able to point him to on paper. So, you're describing that kind of combination of logic, common sense, and it all gets synthesized, and suddenly you have a hunch or a gut feeling that you should act in a certain way now. A few years ago, and I forget there was some rumbling in the economy. I think I'm trying to remember when it was. It wasn't that long ago. And I remember speaking to somebody and saying, if there's anything there's any investment that you think that if the market were to drop, if we were to look at what my holdings are, and you were to say, gee, I wish I'd sold that. Like, what should I sell now so that I'm not looking at it 6 months from now and I'm saying, gee, I wish I had sold it, but let me sell it now ahead of time so that we can kind of be a little bit ahead of the curve. So sometimes, that's part of the survival instinct that is so much a part of the sixth sense in that sensory way.
Oh, if only my sixth sense told me to buy Apple stock when they first come out with the iPhone. Oh, if I'd only known then what I know now. All right, we got a great viewer watching and fan of the show, watching the show, sent this in. It says, my mom had a dream that my grandpop told her to go to the doctor. This was back in 91. She went to her gynecologist, who she hadn't seen for years, and then they found uterine cancer. So there is a classic case of somebody hearing and then acting upon in a dream, acting upon a dream. So sometimes, and I would think you might agree with me on this, that maybe, and I don't know if we differentiate between lucid dreams and regular dreams, but if it's an intense dream, that even if something sounds a little ridiculous, should we follow it on the hunch that it could be an answer to something, or could be a foreboding or a forewarning that we need to take action, or should we just ignore them? Because in this case here, it worked. But what if it said something else? Should we act on a dream even if it doesn't seem logical?
Well, if it's I always go by the rule of thumb: better safe than sorry. So, if it's a precaution, to kind of, obviously grandfather was somebody that his mother respected. And so, it's like my dad coming and telling me to buy water. I think that, if it's something where, you feel like, yeah, maybe I should check into that, it's always better to be safe than sorry.
Raul Sanchez, do you consider yourself a New Ager? And on that, I would bet that, say, like maybe a Hasidic Jew might look at the New Testament as New Age. So, but in your particular case, do you consider yourself and I don't know that there is a definition for a New Ager. I mean, I don't know. Is that somebody that collects rocks or hugs trees, or you can't lump. I mean, maybe if you just say a prayer, somebody might consider yourself So is there a description, and do you consider yourself one?
Well, I think New Age was kind of it was a marketing genre that came out, in kind of the late 1990s. For publishers, people became much more interested in kind of, new thought and, the law of attraction and psychic phenomenon, and all got lumped into this kind of category of New Age, which, ranges from, as you said, crystals, for example, believing in rocks, to, I've studied with indigenous healers and shamans and, and people who practice traditions that go back thousands and thousands of years. So, and from a spiritualist point of view, or from a Buddhist, I've been practicing as a Buddhist for many years and meditating. None of that's new. So, from that point of view, no. But do I believe that it's important for us to kind of look at these issues in a new way, so that we're no longer suffering from the prejudices that have really haunted and suppressed people for so many generations? If that's what it means to be New Age, then yeah, count me in.
Is there a defining date for New Age versus Old Age?
I don't know. It's a good question. I don't know.
I'm going to look that up myself, man. So yeah, I mean, so there are people that have a view about what New Age is and what it isn't. I mean, some people collect rocks and say they have magical powers. I mean, they can assign certain things. Now, certainly from a biblical standpoint, it didn't have a lot of good things to say about witches. And I would expect, Dr. Laurie, you're not a witch, right? Yeah.
No, I'm not.
You're not a
No,
witch?
I'm not. No, I'm not.
Whew.
No.
Okay. Man, I'd hear it after the show if you said yes. But anyway, so
Are your viewers asking if I'm a witch? Because
no, no,
I
no,
am
no, no. I
not.
was just throwing that out there. I mean, because I'm just kind of segueing off of New Age. I mean, I don't know where that can go. Everybody has their point of view, so to speak. But so, what about orgone? Have you heard of that? That's like I don't know if that's a rock or a material, but it's supposed to protect. Right there, now orgone is something that's supposed to protect you from aliens. So wouldn't that be in the category of New Age?
Well, the question of whether aliens are New Age or not, I mean, is interesting because they appear in the Bible and they show up in Mayan, hieroglyphics and
Mm-hmm.
sculptures. And, theoretically, some people say that, they're the ones that carved the Nazca lines and that built the
Mm-hmm.
pyramids and the Inca pyramids. So, I don't consider, there's that show Ancient Aliens. I don't think that aliens or the subject of aliens is particularly new. I think
Mm-hmm.
the whole idea that we are that humans are the most intelligent species or intelligent force in the galaxy. I mean, boy, if we're the most intelligent force in the galaxy's in big trouble.
Mm-hmm.
I think there have to be other types of beings and intelligences that are coexisting with us, even though they may not be coexisting with us in physical form the way we conceive of them.
Mm-hmm. Um, I'm going to make what I think would be a fair statement. Back in the day, around the Crusades, Dark Ages, the Roman Catholics, the priests would have the spiritual guidebook in Latin, and it would be chained to the altar. And it was in Latin, so they expected that the people couldn't read it, and they certainly didn't want somebody to interpret it. So they try to keep the people sort of ignorant in that way. Um, I guess they really didn't want the truth in that book. They felt it would cause their power grip to be loosened because they were in fear of the leaders at that time. Particularly the religious leaders were in power. Today, everybody's getting banned, shadow banned, booted off, canceled. Isn't that the same thing that the priests were doing back in the Dark Ages?
Well, it's very interesting. There was an interview last night on Bill Maher with it was Len. His name is Len Grossman. He was the head of the ACLU for many years, and they were talking about free speech. And free speech is the right for anybody to say what's on their mind, assuming, and this is my view, assuming that it's not threatening or violent towards other people. But I mean, that's my criteria. But people who are pure advocates of free speech believe that you should be entitled to express your views and your opinion, and that you're protected under the Constitution.
Mm.
And when we start, canceling or blocking or kind of finessing or manipulating how people express themselves,
Mm.
it becomes very convoluted and it becomes very dangerous,
Mm.
I think.
We were talking earlier in the first hour, suggesting that when somebody has a spiritual experience, particularly I think it almost starts with the kids, that if they see an imaginary friend, we collapse around them saying, well, no, they're not really there. We talk them out of it, we stop them, and now we're talking about speech. For instance, if I can use the example today, there's some massive protests going on in Canada. All these truckers went to Ottawa, and the system worldwide really is collapsing against their speech, saying you don't have the right free speech. And the way they frame that and justify that kind of thinking is they throw a tagline out: the racists are coming to town, the misogynists are coming to town, and all they're doing is exercising their free speech. So people the free speech really is almost a thing of the past. And with the computers, the easier it gets for some controllers. I am sure, and I hate to bring up a Nazi thing, but if Hitler had the power of tech back then, he probably would have won World War II. He would have got away with a lot more stuff. He was probably happy that he got away with what he did. I mean, he convinced people that the Jews were evil, and he went on from there, and they carried disease and this and that, and the majority believed him. They were tramping down free speech too. So we have that thing. We have a lot of bubbles, a lot of walls, should I say, to break through to where we can get to. Maybe, like somebody asked, are these things interfering with our spirituality, our ability to have these senses when we're constantly being bombarded by this system that tries to categorize us, stamp us, number us, put us in a tribe to control us? So we don't seem. How can we stop going with that and start heading back where you're trying to go, and that it's into the more spiritual, the more relying on your senses rather than the media?
Well, I think, the answer to your question is in the question, which is that, and I say this in the 5 gifts, and the American Red Cross says this to people, when they notify that you've lost somebody in a natural disaster, turn off the screens, turn off the media, get off social media for a while. Sit with yourself, pay attention to nature, take a walk, listen to music, hang out with your pet, make eye contact with another human being, go to the supermarket and ask the cashier how they're having, what kind of day they're having, reconnect on a human level, and forget what's on the screens for a while. Don't let your life be controlled by all that external stuff. And your inner voice will get stronger. I truly believe that.
All right. Got a couple more questions we probably get in here for the end here. It says, is today's medical system corrupt and evil?
Well, I think there's corruption, but I also think that, it's kind of a mistake to call it a system. I don't think that it's a system anymore. I mean, I think you have so many special interests, and I know so many doctors who are so frustrated by the difficulty that they have in practicing patient-centered medicine. The interference, the business prerogatives, the cost of malpractice insurance, the prioritization and the regulation and the auditing by insurance companies. The pressure that they're under to save people's lives, but they're not supposed to spend more than 10 minutes per patient. It's not a system anymore. It's barely a profession anymore because of the way things have broken down in this country. I think on so many other levels, and I think that medicine is kind of a symptom of that.
Well, I think the Hippocratic Oath, from what I can see, reports I'm getting from some places that it must be disavowing it. And I thought that was like the bedrock thing that you could always count on, most unpolitical thing that there could possibly be, the Hippocratic Oath, your doctor, a hospital that must be looking out for your best interest. It's just another one of those things. It just doesn't seem like it's exactly that way right now. I don't want to throw it out because we're all going to need some health care, but there's a lot of eruptions that are saying there's like warning signs, like Will Robinson and the Robot Man, warning, warning. We're getting these warning signs. Something is changing, and it doesn't seem to be better. I don't like these dark kind of conversations, but it kind of went off that there. But again, back to your positivity statement, and that is, a lot of the media, if that's what's in your brain, that may be, what you're putting in might be coming out. What you're feeding on might be what's coming out. All right, a couple more questions, and then we'll be at the end here. Max says, Dr. Laurie, do you believe in raising your Kundalini energy above the waistline? I have no idea what that means.
Well, Kundalini is a type of yoga. I don't practice it, but there's certainly, again, there are many ancient practices of raising that life force energy that gives you kind of more enhanced clarity and focus. It's not part of my practice, but people have been doing it for thousands of years.
Do you do this chakra stuff? Do you believe in all that chakra stuff?
I do believe that we have chakras, and I know that they are important in terms of very often if we can do some chakra meditation, mm-hmm. It can help us to rebalance.
Who gave people the chakra?
Sorry, what?
Who gave people the chakra?
Well, I think if you look at the picture of the human aura, there are certain ways that bioenergetic photographs will show that there are certain like indentations in the aura that actually correspond to the mm-hmm. energy, the wheels of energy, which also correspond to 7 different glands in the body, mm-hmm. including the pituitary gland and the pineal gland.
Yeah, I was going to say, is the pineal gland the source of the sixth sense?
That's what they say. But then there's new science that says that we have sixth sense, we have intuition in every cell in our body, and that it's not limited to the right brain or the pineal gland. Mm-hmm. But traditionally, in mysticism, pineal gland, which is in the space between the eyebrows, is mm-hmm. believed to be the center of sixth sense and inner knowing.
Mm. Well, I don't have much trust in it. One time I had some acne there, and I wasn't getting any readings. It was blocking my readings, man. So the other day I'm looking at YouTube, and I've had dozens of people with near-death experiences on this program over the years, and so I've heard a lot of stories, a lot of interviews, and I saw one, and it looked good. Guys, it said, I'm bringing back a message. So naturally, I'm going to watch it. I'm going to click on it. Well, so I click on it. Turns out that the guy said he died, but he went to some sort of chakra place. And he said, when he come back, he said, man, it's all the chakra, this chakra did this chakra over there. I'm thinking, man, look, I've been talking to people for years. Ain't nobody said there's a chakra on the other side. So I couldn't watch it. I couldn't watch it anymore. I had to divest myself from that video there, kind of alter my sense there. But hey, we are getting toward the end there, Doctor. And I do want to say, you have some books, The Sixth Sense and the 5 Gifts. Now, where can people get those?
Well, those are available on Amazon. They're available in, you can ask for them in bookstores. Barnes & Noble can order them for you. They've been around, the 5 Gifts has been around a couple of years. I'd like to say that it came out right at the time of the Parkland shooting, which was 4 years ago. And my publisher, HCI Books, and I donated books to every teacher at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School after the shooting.
Very nice. Very nice.
Proud of that. And Sixth Sense is still rocking after 30 years. Wow. And it's now an audiobook. Both books are audiobooks, by the way.
By the way, I was going to ask you this. What year was it that you were on the Art Bell Show?
I was in the Art Bell Show in 2007. That's when I brought out this latest edition of Sixth Sense, the one that you've been kind enough to show the cover. That says Sixth Sense, Unlocking Your Ultimate Mind Power.
Interesting. Okay, checking the poll, see if we've moved that at all. What is the Sixth Sense? Looks like 50% say extrasensory perception and 35% say knowing beyond the 5 senses and a few intuitions or hunches. Well, I'm gonna keep working on my hunches. And my Sixth Sense and my hunch is that you know a little bit more about the spiritual guidebook than you've been letting on.
Could be. I really appreciate your asking me on the show and really giving me an opportunity to really speak very honestly. I know there are people out there listening who have had similar experiences and who may not have been able to speak as openly about them. And I really think this is an opportunity for us to kind of open the way for greater honesty about Sixth Sense experiences, because it's not weird. It's just part of human life, and it enhances us. It makes us grow. It helps us to grow in appreciation for God and for the higher beings that are around us, that are here to help us.
So you're saying don't be a Sixth Sense hater?
That's right.
Don't be a sixth sense
Don't be
hater.
afraid. Don't be afraid of it.
Okay.
You know?
All right. Dr. Laurie Nadel, I appreciate you coming on the program tonight.
Thank you so much. I've had a great time.
All right. Very good.
You're a great interview.
All right.
Appreciate it.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
All right, everybody. That was Dr. Laurie Nadel talking about this